So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 28th Annual Government Roundtable here near Athens at Lagonisi, spiraling through the conflicts in search of opportunities. And you can see the logo here of this conference, which has a sort of spiral shape, a question mark, an exclamation mark. I hope that it won't leave you dizzy. I hope it will leave you with a clearer idea of what to expect when we've finished our conversations. We have a very busy day. Just to kick us off, I'm joined by my fellow chairs of this event, Joan Hoey and Alasdair Ross, and we're going to just give a sort of little bit of an opening overview of the environment that we face for this event. Joan, if I could start with you. We've just had European elections, which have been a bit of an upheaval for Europe, and straight away have prompted a surprising election in France. So how much more turbulence can we expect in Europe as a result of this?
Quite a lot, I would say. I think it's what we're going through is a kind of new political era, and it's been a long time coming. And so everybody's talking about this as a political shock, but it's been really signaled over quite a long period. And essentially what's happening is that the political center is being pushed aside by insurgent populist parties, and that's been building for at least a decade. So, Macron founded his new party based on the idea that it's neither left nor right, and it's now facing a political wipeout. So there's some uncertainty, obviously, about the final outcome of the election next weekend, but there's either going to be a majority for a national rally and a national rally government, or a hung parliament. So essentially gridlock, political gridlock in France. And if the national rally were to get a majority, then there could be political gridlock in Europe too. And so, yes, I think the UK is facing a different kind of political earthquake, where the most successful, probably, political party of all time, the Conservative Party, is going to be also decimated in the election.
Well, let me ask Alasdair to talk a bit about Britain. We actually have the election on the last day of our event here on Thursday. Everybody's expecting Keir Starmer to win. Is that your expectation?
I don't think there's very much doubt about that at this stage. I think the interesting question that people are looking at now is by how much and what that signifies. So, on the one hand, it would seem sensible to hope for a reasonable majority for whoever wins, because what we don't need at this point is weak government that's constantly under threat. On the other hand, there is a school of thought that too much of a majority puts the government at risk of not being confronted properly by a responsible opposition. And we may well find ourselves there, it appears. And then there's the question of who makes up that opposition, how they behave, where they see their strategic direction, with eyes on 2029, what happens after the first Starmer cycle.
Yeah, so definitely almost certainly change of personnel in Britain, huge uncertainty in Europe. Just a couple of words on the other big election that is looming, which is, of course, in the United States, where everything has suddenly been thrown into even greater uncertainty than was previously the case, with Joe Biden's frankly disastrous debate performance just this past week. And I think it's clear that the Biden camp is going to try to ride this out and claim that everything is really okay and that he can come back from this. It's really, in my view, I spend a lot of my time covering the United States, probably has to be the working hypothesis that Joe Biden remains the candidate for the Democrats, because only Joe Biden can actually change that. Nobody can prevent him. He has the delegates at the party's national convention to do that. But I think the next couple of weeks are going to be absolutely critical when we see what happens in the opinion polls and the sorts of pressures that Democrats, even down the ticket, congressional and Senate contests, are going to be feeling as a result of this debacle. And we could see a lot of pressure on the Biden camp to change the game as a result of that. And of course, any further slips, he'll be very much protected from unscripted appearances, one suspects, from here on. But any further slips would only fuel this pressure on the Biden team. So already it was looking bad in the polls for Biden. The Economist's election prediction model was giving Donald Trump a 2 in 3 chance of retaining the presidency before winning the election before this disaster happened. So I think that everybody was complaining that this was a very boring campaign with 2 familiar candidates and not much action in the primaries. It's going to be anything but boring from here on in. Joan, our time is very short, so I just want to get a very brief rundown from you on the Economist Intelligence Unit's predictions for the world economy, for the European economy, and specifically for Greece. It's always very helpful at this event to start off with your predictions of what we're looking at in terms of economic growth for the coming year.
Well, despite the political turmoil and obviously still big geopolitical headwinds, the outlook for global growth is looking a bit rosier than it has been for some time. So EIU's forecast for global growth is 2.5%, which indicates that there is resilient demand in the face of high interest rates. And that is really being driven by a very robust US economy, where we're forecasting growth about 2.2%. There's probably going to be a cyclical upturn in China as well, with some kind of moderate stimulus going on there. Conditions in Europe are going to remain challenging, but they're improving, and disruption to energy supply is easing. Interest rates have started finally to come down, and what we're seeing is stronger growth momentum being driven by private consumption, which reflects easing inflation and tight labor markets. So Eurozone growth, we're forecasting 1% growth this year. Germany is still going to be the weakest economy, with growth of around 0.4% in 2024. EU 27, 1.2%. And in Greece, what we saw was, after a rather weak fourth quarter of 2023, growth rebounding in the first quarter, coming in at 1.7%. We're forecasting growth much above the Eurozone average in Greece of around 2.5% in 2024, which is probably a little above consensus. But what we're seeing here is generally tourism-dependent economies performing very well, better than the manufacturing powerhouses. There's still a lot of scope for catch-up growth, I think, in Greece after the crisis years. And the RRF funds, these very substantial EU funds, are also making a big difference. And obviously the policy environment is much improved too.
So there's quite a contrast there to set us off between the very uncertain political environment and a rather confident economic picture that you've just presented there. I think that gives us a very good basis to have our discussions over the next few days. We'll end it there in the interest of time, and we're going to move straight on to the next session. But thank you, Joan, and Alasdair, obviously going to be back for much more later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.